Okay. All right. Welcome, Dr. Zia Poonja, to the Puzhitsky podcast. Happy to have you here and talk some science. You are involved with MyHealthspan, a company that I'm going to be working with a little bit, doing some promos for you guys, and I'm honestly really excited to check it out because I've been very much into the whole longevity health space. A lot of influencers in that now, and getting some testing done for myself. So why don't you tell us what you're all about and what you're working with and what you're working on with MyHealthspan?
Sure. So I'm an oncologist by training, and practice oncology here in Victoria, Canada. And I also have a few passion projects that started about 4 to 5 years ago that are in the health tech space, trying to innovate, and more importantly, a real itch to try and get people to stay healthy for as long as possible to improve their health span. And it's been an incredible journey that led me to meet up with a bunch of other like-minded people, and we started a company called MyHealthspan.
Awesome. And what do you guys do at MyHealthspan?
Sure. So the premise is to be able to it's probably better explained by giving my own journey
Hmm.
in um, recognizing that there are things that we can do to improve our quality of life and keep us healthy longer. And there's been a huge interest in this. There has been a lot of awesome people that have done great work, like Peter Attia, and I got super inspired by that. But the biggest issue was when I'm having that discussion with my 88-year-old self, because I'm trying to optimize and, what could I do to help him? What are my goals for him? Do I want him to be active? I want him to pick up his great grandchildren. The biggest impediment on that journey was trying to create some sort of structure and have access to testing in the Canadian medical system. Primary care is really challenging for people to access. And even when they have good access to primary care, I have a family physician, so I have access to primary care. I'm still not able to get a good roadmap on how to be as aggressive as possible. And there's so much information out there that we don't have a good objective way of doing it. So that's so let's put pen to paper and let's try and create an objective roadmap that tries to beat out some of the noise. Because some people they say, okay, well, take rapamycin, take metformin. There's a lot of buzzwords out there, but there's no one who's actually trying to say, okay, can we do this in a more objective way? And what are the metrics that we can use to test it? So we create a company that offers a whole bunch of testing and is able to curate it for you and guide you through it so that you have a good understanding of where you sit.
Okay, that's awesome. Yeah, I'm a big fan of Peter Attia as well. I've read his book he published recently, Outlive. Very cool read. It's pretty dense, but I like that he actually dives into a lot of the topics as opposed to just kind of scan them on the surface. Because with the whole, there's a lot of like health and like fitness influencers out there now, and a lot of like quick fixes. Do 5 push-ups a day and you'll look like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Um, but being a science-based person myself, I really enjoy listening to his podcast because he's not scared to dive into it. And what I want to focus on with you here today, talking to an expert such as yourself that's now been doing this for how long? How long have you been on this journey for with my health span?
4 years.
4 years, yeah. So you've really been in the trenches with all this data and all the research for 4 years, which is a good amount of time. So, there's the thing that, and just my experience with it, again, despite, so for anybody listening out there, you might not know, I have a master's degree in synthetic organic chemistry. So I've read some papers in my day, myself, but in terms of the, the things that you said, the thing that I took from Peter Attia's book as well is prevention, primary prevention, right? Because I think what you were touching on a little bit with our medical system, you said Canada specifically. I'm sure it's similar, if not worse, in the US, but it's not at all preventative. It's what's the opposite of preventative?
Reactionary.
Reactionary, right? So, there are all these miracle drugs we have and that they peddle in the US and here, insulin and whatnot. Like you get something, you take the drug and you kind of delay the issue as opposed to attacking it before it even happens. So that's that's why I was so excited to work with you guys, and I'm assuming that's kind of your goal here is to shift the whole industry almost to that preventative mind state uh,
Yes.
mindset,
Yes.
right?
We're certainly pioneers in that thought concept.
Right,
So we absolutely, as you said, we recognize that we're spending trillions on the other end, which is great. Like the work that I do as an oncologist is phenomenal. We've been able to make huge strides in the treatment of breast and lung cancer. But when we take a step back and look at the system, and we see how much time we're spending on the reactionary end
hmm
and how much little time we're devoting to the prevention end, um, trying to bridge that mismatch is exactly what we're trying to do, what we're trying to build, what we're trying to put in the ether, and where our energies are sort of positioned. You talked about Peter Attia. I think he's phenomenal. He's like one of the thought leaders in this space.
right,
Um, and he's provided a great roadmap in his book and his podcasts. He has his own clinic, and but access is a huge issue. It's
right,
super expensive, and that was one of the things that we sort of struggled with. Is like, okay, well, we want to get people Peter Attia level testing. We want people to know their VO2 max. We want them
right,
to know their apoprotein, lipoprotein little a or ApoB, um, some of these more advanced markers. And we want to try and do it at as little cost as possible. And that's been a huge challenge for us because testing is expensive. Um, Getting everything curated and put together has been expensive, but I think we're doing it. And the successes we've had with the clients that have come through have been really inspirational.
yeah. And like as just a I guess a health conscious, I'm 25 years old, so I'm on the young side, luckily. Like I'm healthy, so I don't have too many worries about that. But I've been on my own fitness journey since I was probably in grade 11 is when I started working out. And with that comes the nutrition. And then you're like, oh, what are my, and then I got into Peter Attia. I read his book and exactly what you said, ApoB, ApoA, ApoB, all those like, what was it like uric acid, all those levels that he recommend the biomarkers he recommends you test. I'm like, okay, that'd be great. I went to my doctor, I got a blood test, and I'm like, where is any of this, right? It's not there. And it's actually very interesting when I was having my conversation with my family doctor. Almost I had to just to get a blood test, being young and seemingly healthy. He was so he's like, why? Why do you need it? You're young, you're healthy. What are you doing? I'm like, I just want to see my levels. I just want to do it once a year as a preventative measure. And he was almost, um, I don't know, what's the word I'm looking for here? Like, yeah, anyways, he like, I was like, I felt like I was wasting his time. You know what I mean? And that's not great. And I understand because of maybe the way the Canadian healthcare is also set up versus the US healthcare system. Maybe it's a little different, but
I, I don't think so. I
yeah.
think it's no, it was just that, and I don't fault the current medical system for that because, you're super healthy. Go live your life sort of thing.
hmm
And, you don't have any major ailment compared to some of the other people I see. So we don't need to be concerned about you,
Right.
is the current MO.
hmm
Um, and, but if you're interested in trying to prevent type 2 diabetes, if you're interested in trying to prevent heart disease, simple things like knowing your blood pressure, knowing your blood
Right.
work, and if you start seeing those things creep into, or put a CGM on, a continuous glucose monitor on, and have someone walk you through what the results are and give you that positive feedback. If, hey, if you're eating certain meals, this is what your glucose is doing, or that negative feedback, wow, look at how you spiked for and how long when you had a certain type of meal. That sort of insight is something that you getting now, Matt, is going to
Hmm.
help you so much more 20 years from now.
Right. Yeah,
Because
and if
getting
I
those, yeah.
can consistently measure it throughout my life, because um, I guess genetically people also have different levels of, I mean, there's ranges, but some people are predisposed to higher blood pressure, and there's nothing they can just genetically, right? And they have to work that little bit extra when they're younger compared to the average Joe who can have no fitness regimen, horrible diet, and just because they were born the way they were, they don't have to work as hard as you might to keep their blood pressure down, right? So those are all important. I don't think it matters how old you are. Like that's the whole point of this preventative versus reactive care, right? Is to prevent now, get tested now. Uh, that's awesome. So having been doing this for 4 years now, and I know you can listen to Peter Attia and read his book. What are the key factors that you've found? Maybe biomarkers or lifestyle choices that are key to increasing your longevity.
So the biggest one, the number one would be, like we mentioned before, just being way more objective about it.
Mm,
There's so much subjectivity. People, when we chat with them and when we've interviewed them, they're like, I think I'm really healthy. And I think I'm really healthy because I work out, or I run, or I'm eating this kind of diet, and I feel phenomenal. Like I feel great. But that really doesn't tell us a
right.
whole lot. But if you start being like, okay, well, what's your VO2 max? Like that's a really great objective measure of your cardiovascular performance, your ability to perform. And turns out, guess what? It's super malleable. Like
Hmm.
mine was super low, but within a year, I was able to get it up. And turns out I thought I was killing it at the gym. But
Yeah.
you know what? I was doing all the wrong things. Or I didn't even know what the right things were because
Yeah.
I was guided by a metric.
And
The same,
and what let's dive into that because I'm very curious about what you meant by you thought you were killing it at the gym, but turns out you weren't. What were you
yeah.
doing wrong? What were you doing before and
So
what are you doing better now?
I was doing a mix of resistance training. So when I was in Vancouver, I joined CrossFit,
Hmm.
and then I was loving running the seawall when I lived in Vancouver.
Hmm.
So I considered myself a really active person.
Right.
What I was missing was getting like, way more objective about my resistance training. So I was just sort of, I would go to the gym, or if I was going to a CrossFit class once a week, I wasn't actually seeing how much weight I was doing. I had to get a trainer and actually figure
Mm,
out how to do a squat properly, a deadlift properly. And then I started increasing my weight in terms of how much I could lift. And all of a sudden, with that approach, increasing my muscle mass plus continuing my cardiovascular fitness, I saw a huge spike in my VO2 max. And I then felt I was like, okay. And a few of my other metrics got a lot better, like my cholesterols and my ApoB. So I was super keen to be like, hey, I'm fine going on medical therapy with a statin or
right.
ezetimibe. But then all of a sudden, you know, I was able to see that, okay, some small changes that we're recommending, like I cut out, I was very carb heavy and I reduced my amount of carbohydrates.
Okay.
That tanked my triglycerides, and all of a sudden, my ApoB is in the perfect place where I need it to be.
Nice, nice. Yeah, because I actually feel like I have the opposite issue because I've been involved in sports my whole life, so I've been lifting since a very early age, and I feel like when you're a teenager, you want to be get big and look muscular, and I really got that part of my training down in terms of I know how to deadlift, I know how to squat, I'm in the gym lifting like 6 times a week, but my cardio is what I need to work on, and there's like a cliche saying if you lift, cardio kills gains, right? Which is interesting because I always thought I never intentionally did cardio. I just kind of, I played tennis, golf, whatever. I'm like, I get my cardio from that, which is great. Those are great ways to stay active. But I feel like I have the opposite issue where I have to be more intentional about my cardiovascular training as opposed to just lifting.
Yeah.
Um, is there anything to the I guess if for most people that are starting maybe a little bit later in life, if you're not in your 20s or even if in your 30s or 40s or whatever, like I guess something that I remember Atia talking about in his book is that it's really never too late to start, right? Because maybe you want to speak on that a little bit because obviously it's easier for somebody in their 20s to build muscle and whatnot, but how do you approach this if you're later in your life and you want to start getting healthier?
Yeah. So the human body is amazingly malleable. And the response to a weight or a stress, it's going to have a response.
Hmm.
Um, and that response happens when you're, in your 20s, or if you're in your 40s, your 50s, or your 60s. We see in another project that I'm part of, which is involved in exercise oncology. So we get people who have a diagnosis of cancer, and then we have them meet with kinesiologists and get them exercised, get some exercise. So these are people who are usually fairly sedentary. Um, we notice that, hey, all of a sudden they're undergoing chemo and they have less nausea. They're able to take more cycles,
Right.
less fatigue during treatment. So the approach, some of these lifestyle approaches that we're talking about are available to everyone and the body's going to have a positive response. It's the best thing that we got. That's not a drug. Is
Right.
is is optimizing our fitness performance. Um, how does MyHealthspan help with that? Well, it's working with our longevity coaches, it's about getting a bit of a guide, seeing what you're doing right, and seeing if we can attach it to a metric. And
Hmm.
that's the most important piece that I feel is missing. Atia's approach is phenomenal. Getting access to a lot of those tests is challenging.
Right.
And then even after you get those tests, like getting your hands on a continuous glucose monitor, having someone sit there and walk you through it is also it's hard. We get it, right?
Yeah.
And there has to be that healthcare always has to have a human's touch to it. So it's great to be able to get a test done, but you also need some follow up with someone who's willing to sit down and be like, hey, okay, you got this test. This is what it means. And this is what you can do with the results. If we reproduce it again, this is the change that we're looking to see.
Yeah, and I think even bringing it back a little more to basic principles, because I might be taking it for granted because I've been into this for so long, and so have you. What is the difference between lifespan and health span for
Oh,
for the people that are just maybe, just first time ever hearing about this? What is even the difference, right? Sounds like the same thing to me.
yeah, lifespan is, we're born and we die.
Yeah.
And the average human lifespan is about 82 years. Health span, on the other end, is the number of healthy years we have.
Hmm.
Um, and the average health span is about 66. So there's a big gap there between our health span and our lifespan. And the hope is that we want to push that health span as far out as possible because then we're living a life that isn't having to deal with a lot of these chronic diseases of aging.
Yeah, that's slow death, right?
Yeah, and the
Yeah.
thing is, age is the biggest risk factor. So when we
Hmm.
think like longevity science, it's like, oh, I want to live till I'm 100. We get a lot of that, and we sort of turn it backwards and say, hey, that age, it's a risk factor.
Yeah.
It's a risk factor. That the higher that number, the higher chance of you developing cancer. Higher that number, the higher chance of you falling dead from a heart attack.
Yeah.
Uh, but we can adjust. We can deal with that number by being a bit more proactive. Just sitting and not being able to have access to a lot of this is not going to, and just waiting. And that's the other pet peeve I had is um, that waiting that a lot of people are doing, even awesome people who are like Red Peter Atias, but people like yourself. who've like they have a great understanding, but then they don't know where to go to be able to access a lot of this stuff and curate it for them. And that was the project that we were that's the mission that we're trying to solve.
Yeah, because I mean, like even again, myself, I've been training my whole life, and I'm a literal scientist, right? So I understand the data, and I understand I have 7 years of university training to understand this stuff. So, and even myself, I'm sitting there going like, okay, what now, right? Because I went to my doctor, I tried to get a blood test, and it's still hard to put all those things together. And it's funny listening to all these health gurus talk about, go on Joe Rogan and talk about ice baths and all this like all these like very niche biomarkers. It's great. It's for me personally, it's just cool to learn the science, and I like to understand like all of that, and it's cool to read into it. But hey, if you want to apply this to your life, at the end of the day, you have to somebody has to make it accessible, and people have to be able to understand, okay, this is what I need to do to get healthier. And I feel like that's what you guys are doing, exactly what you guys are doing, which is cool, right?
And what we're trying not to do is trying not to. There's also the other end of the spectrum where there's some really niche tests. People get really lost in the weeds. And a lot of this stuff is easy, right? A lot of this
Right.
stuff is basic,
The
right? Like
80/20 rule, right?
exactly, right? And sometimes you're like, oh, I need to start taking metformin because I need to work on mTOR because I need to make my mitochondria healthier.
Right.
And it's like, hold on. Have you
Yeah.
like let's work a little bit backwards. Like
They're
what
saying that while they're on their couch eating a pizza, you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And or they haven't even taken a look to see what's under the hood or what their risks are for a lot of these diseases of aging.
Yeah, and like with my blood test, so I got one quite recently, maybe 2, 3 months ago, and again, the blood test that I got from my doctor, everything's fine, everything's within the range. I have a friend who's I checked it myself, and then I have a friend who's currently in med school, one of my really good friends, had him double check it, so it's all good. But I still, because maybe because I'm a perfectionist, maybe because I am so involved in reading these books and in my own health and trying to maximize my health span. I still feel I can't help but feel like there's something it like I'm exercising, but I'm like I'm not running enough. I'm lifting, but like I'm not doing everything I can. And my diet, that I know for sure I can clean up. Like I have a healthy-ish diet, but I know I'm taking advantage of the fact that I'm 25 for now and I eat some questionable stuff almost every day. So um I really want to yeah, I feel like I was really excited to partner up with you guys and just get this done. Because if I have like I haven't done the testing yet, but I'm really excited to see the metrics and to talk to your longevity coach and see what that's like and what I get out of it and have like a clear plan of action and what to do because that's what's missing. I feel like there's so much information out there, which is great because it's out there for people to access, but even for me, it can be overwhelming. Like, what do you do? And you guys almost break that down into a maybe an easier to follow step-by-step process, right? Because you don't just give us, right? From what I understand with the longevity coach, you don't just give us the information, you help us digest it and tell us what to do with it, right?
Absolutely. And you touched on actually another really great point, Matt, is you had blood testing done.
Hmm.
Um, and the big question is, hey, what was missing from there? Like, was there an ApoB done? Was there a
No.
lipoprotein done?
Yeah, yeah.
And what we found initially, we're like, let's just all get this done in the public system. But there's so much difficulty in doing that because labs aren't able to give you a lipoprotein little a until you've had a heart attack.
Right.
That's 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 the current system that we're in. It's like, okay, well, that piece of testing is only available after, and it speaks exactly to that reactionary point that you mentioned.
Exactly.
But to piggyback on that, we at MyHealthspan, our two developers, we gave them the task of saying, hey, there's a lot of our clients that already have blood work. Um, Find a way of being able to upload all that blood work. If it's a PDF or a piece of paper, let them have it take a picture of it or upload it, And they've made it such that people can upload their blood work into our dashboard. And the
Oh,
beauty
great.
about it is our ranges are on the more aggressive end.
Hmm.
So whereas,
What do you
the
mean by
report,
that?
so, if you're, for example, some of your cholesterol markers, it may show within the normal range in your blood work that you have done from a lab or at your doctor. But all of a sudden, you're in our MyHealthspan dashboard, and there's greens and there's yellows and
Right,
there's
right, right.
reds, and we're able to say, well, you're optimal, but here's what super optimal looks like.
Right.
This is why this is super optimal. So if you're, 1.0 or 8.8 for an ApoB, we're going to say, hey, this is what super optimal looks like, but we're going to triangulate it for you. We're going to be like, hey, you know what? You're at an increased risk of heart disease because you also have these other markers. So let's
Hmm.
be
Hmm.
more aggressive on your ApoB. Turns out ApoE testing. So we do genetic ApoE testing, and take a swab, we send it to our lab, and we're able to sequence that, and we're able to give that people that information. But we're also able to say, hey, if you're ApoE, you're ApoE4, that's an increased risk of cardiovascular disease and developing Alzheimer's. We know that from the data, from research. But there's the what you can do about it is you can be more aggressive about these certain markers. So let's
Right.
not wait.
Okay, cool. So I already kind of asked you a similar question, but so I want to ask you two things. So we keep saying ApoA, ApoB, and I remember reading and understanding, but it's completely, so it's a good chance for me to relearn that and for you to speak on it. What exactly, because I know it's an important marker, and mostly the first time I've heard about it was when I read Peter Attia's book. So what is that? What does it show, and why is it important?
Sure. So when we get a cholesterol panel, the traditional cholesterol panel is talking about total cholesterol, LDL, and HDL.
Right,
And and that's all well and good. But what we know from the science of cholesterol and the problem with the cholesterols is them depositing in your artery wall.
right.
So that piece of cholesterol making it to a place where it's supposed to be, and you need cholesterol. It does phenomenal things to your body, to a
Yeah.
place where it's not doing a lot of good for you because it's narrowing your arteries.
Hmm.
It's a probability game. You got more particles floating around, the greater chance some of those particles are going to deposit.
Hmm.
And just knowing your LDL does not tell you a good sense of how many particles are floating around. ApoB is that measurement.
Okay.
ApoB is telling you in the easiest way to understand, it's telling you the number of particles.
Hmm.
So if we're able to reduce the number of ApoB particles that carry cholesterol in the body, we know that
Right.
we're probably going to reduce the chance of that problem happening, that
Okay.
cloggage is happening.
So ApoB, I'm just looking at it right now. It's a protein involved in lipid metabolism. So okay, so it's probably is it an enzyme or
It's a protein, and it sits in.
carrier
So
protein?
yeah, so proteins, if we think of cholesterol,
Hmm.
what happens when we put fat in water? It floats. So you can't have cholesterol in the blood, not in a molecule, circled within a molecule. And you need proteins are water soluble, so they
Right.
become carriers. So all the cholesterol that lives in our body is surrounded by proteins.
Hmm.
And that protein sac allows the cholesterol to float around in our blood without, it makes it soluble because
Hmm.
fat is not soluble, but if you cover it in proteins, it becomes soluble. But ApoB is the number of those soluble fat particles that
Okay,
are.
cool. All right, that's awesome. So that's great. So that tells you because yeah, so again, when most people hear cholesterol, they think bad, right? But that's not at all the case. In fact, you need no cholesterol is also very bad. It
Oh,
means
yeah.
yeah, it's
I mean,
impossible to survive without it, right? So
absolutely. I mean, the brain. all the nerves in our body, all the nerves that
Yeah.
those muscles, they need cholesterol. A lot of our hormones that we
Hmm.
secrete that like wake us up in the morning,
Right.
uh, and keep us healthy, they use cholesterol fats. So it is, and biologically, that's how we were built because cholesterol is a critical ingredient. That's why all this effort was made to try and make it water soluble because we need it in our body for mechanisms, for like the mechanisms we talked about.
Yeah. 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 For a ton of like, I don't think people realize how complex the body is, like how complex the biochemistry of the body is. They just think you wake up, you open your eyes, and it's like, you're walking around and it's, it's all like light on, light off. But like the reality is that there are all these very, very intricate systems that play and have effect on each other. That's why we feel emotions, happy, sad, whatever, clinically depressed, this and that. That's all. It's all just it's chemistry. That's why I was very into chemistry, and I like it's interesting once you get so deep into that, you kind of like have an existential crisis. You're like, what is consciousness? Are we just, because at the end of the day, you can boil it all down to the chemistry, and you take a little bit of that, whatever it is, that makes us special as humans. You can kind of take that away from it
Yeah,
by simplifying it out too much.
we're
But
all just
that's
particles.
cool. Yeah. So yeah, ApoB important, tells you how much bad cholesterol you have, and a good marker
Just how much
to,
yeah, how many particles are floating around,
yeah.
and
So, because is
and
ApoB associated with both high density and low density? Uh,
then we're getting a bit into the weeds,
okay.
because the high density and the low density are just that. That's the density of that cholesterol molecule when you spin it down.
Right.
Um, and I really caution people from taking a strong approach to optimizing things like HDL.
Right.
Um, and while we use a LDL and we test for LDL and we have what we think is our optimal for LDL, and then we gate it based on all the other data that people are giving us, we give way more credence to ApoB because it's a more objective marker.
Hmm.
Critical
Yeah,
number
because
more
I
than just
think
concentration.
what I heard again, the more general thinking would be that, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol, right? HDL versus LDL. And that might be, again, that's probably, well, definitely an oversimplification, right?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, our understanding of lipid science has moved beyond the good and bad
Okay.
cholesterols
Yeah.
to a bit more of a risk stratification piece, like
Right.
things like, hey, what's your lipoprotein little a? So that's another
Right. Little
one
a.
of those
Yeah.
lipoproteins. It's, where we thought we know that sac that surrounds the cholesterol. Some people
Hmm.
have this protein on there, and then we call it lipoprotein little a. And why we care about it? Because what we've seen is those with high levels of lipoprotein little a, it makes their blood more stickier. It has a greater likelihood of sticking cholesterol to the artery wall.
Stickier or more viscous? Like literally stickier.
I say stickier to simplify it because
Yeah.
what we see in those with high levels of lipoprotein little a is we see far more advanced atherosclerosis
Right.
or clogging of the arteries at much younger ages. So
Hmm.
we know that marker of that, if people have that genetic marker, and it's genetic because about 20% of the population have more lipoprotein A, we know that their cholesterol marker is more likely to stick to their coronary arteries.
Okay. Okay.
So not knowing that at all, we think is a huge oversight because how can you start being, how can you give a blanket recommendation on someone's LDL without having that piece of information, having a bit of their genetic history built into that?
Okay, cool. And yeah, so I think that's good. If we go too much into the weeds, I'm afraid it'll be a little too niche. But
Yeah.
again, bringing it back
And, and,
to,
and Matt, you raise another good point, and that's what we did in our first iteration. We were
yeah,
of MyHealthspan. We were so into the weeds, and people were um, it's so easy to get lost, right? And
Right.
also alarmed, like, hey, like make this easy for me to understand. So then, and we have to thank Rex for that because Rex comes from a completely different background where he's like, okay, well, yeah, we need to make this a lot easier to understand. And then we start developing these algorithms like, okay, well, how about we put this in a score? How about we put
Right.
all the metrics together and give you a score? So then you have more of this report card type approach. Um,
Yeah, and it just makes it more accessible because again, so doing a master's degree means you have to teach, right? You have to TA, and I have to teach first year, second year chemistry students, and I still do a little bit. I tutor some students, and you forget sometimes when you get to the more advanced levels of a field, you just take some knowledge for granted. You know what I mean? And you forget that most people don't, it's gibberish to them, right? Like we can talk about um, uh, you have to, and I'm sure as a physician, you also have to, you're very good at that actually, because your job is to communicate with your patients and explain to them what's going on without necessarily teaching them the basics of, lipid biochemistry, right? Because they just don't know it. And why would they? If you're a lawyer or if you work at the jewelry store, like why would you know these things? So most people this stuff if it's overwhelming for me as a literal chemist, I can't imagine how it is for most people to try to understand these biomarkers and what they mean.
and 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 it's another critique that I have of the health system that we're trying to change is that testing and access shouldn't just be in the walls of someone who has access to a doctor. Like, absolutely not. Like, we need to break down those barriers because it's a shame that people don't have access, who want to be able to access these sort of things, that only physicians can, be able to prescribe or write these sort of
Right.
tests. That's a failing of primary care,
Hmm.
making things more accessible, allowing people to advocate for their own health. That is another one of our missions.
Yeah.
Um, and it's it works really well. And the hope, the eventual real gold star that I'm hoping for is that we influence public policy. We get enough
Yeah.
people tested and we start really lighting it up and being able to write about it in a way that, hey, guess what? This approach works. Look at what we're finding. Look at people who are getting tested with us are making changes. And guess what? It costs thousands, thousands to treat a heart attack.
Hmm.
Uh, and 1 in 5 that get a heart attack don't even live to tell the tale.
Yeah.
Or treating diabetes. I mean, it's a billion-dollar industry.
Yeah.
And here in Canada, we need to be cognizant of that because the
Yeah.
public system bears that cost. And we want the public system to bear that cost, but we need to be prudent about our own health. And there isn't enough health advocacy out there that's getting it right.
Yeah, and then again, I want to be careful not to stray too far away from kind of what people might understand here, but I think it's easy for people to see why what you just said, the fact that treating diabetes is a multi-billion-dollar a year industry. Um, globally, I don't know what the numbers are, but they're huge, and that's a big part of the problem is because there was just recently there was all this drama in the U.S. with all the healthcare yeah, with the insurance companies, right? And the fact is that they do influence our healthcare system, right? Like the insurance companies that have a vested monetary interest in selling these drugs to people have a vested interest in the healthcare system. And at the end of the day, if people don't get sick, they don't make money, right? So how do we balance that? Well, I think the only way to do it is to make people realize that this involves everybody. This is an issue that the umbrella, everybody's under it. Everybody is alive and will eventually not be. And hey, do you want to extend that your health span? This concerns you too, right? because, you could be doing something to increase your quality of life. So even if you're one of those people that are it's just such a hard, it's so big. Like the elephant, is so big that it's almost, I mean, I empathize with you, and I'm thankful that there are people like you out there that are trying to change the system, but it's such a big task. And having been involved in, like, in a certain part, like my research, I was involved with certain medical companies in Europe actually, and like trying to get grants. And I kind of saw a little bit behind the curtain of how these things work and what they are giving money to, uh, just even on the research side of it, like where do they issue those grants? It's hard if you want to actually innovate for the right reasons. You know what I mean? As
Yeah.
opposed to the other stuff. But yeah, I guess the only thing you can do is try. But and
Yeah.
and it
All you can do
reminds
is
me of,
try.
yeah, exactly. That's the only thing, right? Um, so it reminds me of I saw a YouTube video recently. I wish I can remember the name, but it was this physician, essentially a doctor. I think he was a brain surgeon. He just
Okay.
posted a video. He quit his job after like 30 years, because he was helping all these people by performing very niche brain surgeries that only he can do. And he was telling them, okay, he fixed the problem. Now you have to do the best thing you can do in order to increase your chances of getting healthier or staying healthy is eat right, sleep, exercise a little bit, have some social interactions. And the people that did do that recovered, and most of the people that didn't, no matter how well he did the surgery, they didn't recover. And he had a little bit of an existential crisis, saying, man, like these things are out there, right? Like I can do this super hard brain surgery, but realistically, it's the 80/20 thing. What you have to do if you want to be healthier is eat well, sleep, exercise, and, you know, try to be happy any way you can. So, what can you speak to? What have you found, again, other than ApoB and certain biomarkers? What's the 20% that gets you 80% of the results, right?
Yeah, the 20% first starts with trying to understand where you stand
Hmm.
and what your risks are. So, what's your hemoglobin A1C? In terms of we're looking at the diabetes world. What are your inflammatory markers like? So getting that report card on your whole health is where it starts. That's where the objective journey starts. And then being able to influence that and watch it over time is, I think, the low-hanging fruit. I think that's what we're missing. Um,
Okay.
it's we know the simple stuff. Most people, like I would say more than 9 out of 10. You tell them exercise, it intuitively makes sense. Diet intuitively makes sense.
Right.
Everyone has different definitions of what those are. And I don't really want to get too deep in the weeds on that because that's a really difficult one to solve.
Hmm.
But on the other end, when we're thinking about this from an algorithm standpoint, is like, okay, well, let's just give people some objective measures to look at, and then they can tweak their things like lifestyle and their things like activity, and their things like diet, and they can play around with their own chemistry set, which is their body, and they can see is it is this is my health, for example, we put all this in a proprietary score, all these metrics, all these DNA tests. And soon people will just be able to upload their blood work that they get from their doctor and they'll get, a MyHealthspan score. Um, and they can see that score and see, okay, well, can I go from a 75 to an 85?
Right.
Uh,
Yeah, that's
and
making it really simple. That's great. Yeah.
and I think that is sort of like that's the low-hanging fruit.
Hmm.
Um, that's number one. That is having some sort of anchor to give yourself an objective look. Like for example, like even in my own family, we have some people that have high lipoprotein A, and they're fit. They're fit as a fiddle. They work out. You look at them, they're in their early 40s, and you're like, this person is not going to have to deal with any chronic disease
Right.
because they're killing it. But turns out their lipoprotein A is sky high,
Wow.
and they're well on their way of becoming that statistic of
Hmm.
developing a heart attack in their 50s. So we're able to, intervene at that point. Another test, another really great success story is some of our genetic testing with a partner that we've been able to partner with, even within my own family. So my father had colon cancer. It was a stage one colon cancer, and he had it cut out. And stage one colon cancer, greater than 90% chance of cure. So he never needed to see an oncologist, which is
Right.
phenomenal. But the other half of the story is he gets a DNA test that tells him that he has a genetic reason for him developing that colon cancer. But now, guess what? His family gets to get tested.
Hmm.
And those with Lynch syndrome can now undergo more aggressive screening.
Yeah.
And, because if we can intervene there and then they get more aggressive screening, so we're trying to catch them at an early stage because we know at early stage, the chance of cure is super high.
Hmm. Yeah, that's great. And how do you see, because I think if you want to like your mission, you said your North Star with all this is to influence policy, right? Eventually, and have it shifted to be more preventative. How do you see that going in the next 10, 20 years? How long do you think that'll take realistically? And do you think this might have to be just because policy is policy. There's what maybe
Yeah.
there is a industry that develops outside of
Yeah.
policy where people just
Yeah.
have to go to, right?
Well, what I'm loving right now is, people like you who are excited about stuff like this, who are
Yeah.
reading Peter Attia's book and how the whole influencer scene, like there's like so many people who are now having awesome conversations about being proactive. So I think that's where it's all started. And I don't know what pace it's going to go at, but I certainly know that I want to be a voice. I want to be at the table
Hmm.
because I want to make sure that we're doing it right, that, we're not going down some rabbit holes and focusing on, like we have really cool influencers who are doing some really crazy stuff like Brian Johnson, right?
Right.
Right. So, which I think is great.
He's the guy
But
that's like trying to live to be however old, right?
yeah, as long as like he doesn't want to die, like he's
Yeah,
doing
yeah, yeah.
spending like
Everything.
two or
Yeah.
3 million on his health every day and doing
Yeah.
like the most like fringe craziest things to get the edge. Uh,
Yes. Yeah.
so hey, that's great, but we need an approach that works on just even the base level, right?
Yeah.
Like even let's get people more aggressive testing that they can't necessarily get through primary care. Let's show them a roadmap to what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um, and that's the voice that we want to be. We want to be a more objective, more trusted voice that's trying to bring people into that sphere.
Yeah, that's interesting that you mentioned was it Brian Johnston is his name?
Brian Johnson, yeah.
Yeah, Brian Johnson. Yeah, he's I've definitely seen some of his stuff. That's definitely the another level. It's most people don't care enough. He cares too much. There has to be somewhere in between, right? Because you can spend yeah, like what were we saying? Like at the end of the day, all we're trying to do here is uh you know, slow down or have a slower death essentially. Because at the end of the day, that's we're all gonna die, right? And we're just kind of trying to slow that process down and trying to enjoy most of the time we have alive. And
Yeah.
if you yeah,
And I think the other piece there is someone that works in people that get sick.
right.
Um, there's like it's tough. Like getting sick is going to happen,
Hmm.
and it's going to happen to me. It's going to happen to people I love, and it happens. Like it's the guarantee
It's the
that.
guarantee, yeah.
But if we can try and delay that as long as possible, we know that we're going to improve people's quality and quantity of life. And why not? Like, why not jump on that?
Yeah.
And that was the big sort of hurrah moment. It's like, well, I
Yeah.
love medicine and I will not give up my role as an oncologist because it took me, um, I enjoyed my journey to get there.
Hmm.
I thoroughly enjoy what I do, but I also really want to innovate and I really want to do something that I believe in. And then there came, my health span. And
Yeah, and I think that's a great way for us to, again, going back to the 80/20. Most people are not Brian Johnson and they don't have, first of all, the means to afford all of that testing and all of those biohacks to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And they don't have the time. They have, a job, kids, a wife, family to take care of, whatever. They just don't have the day to, from what I understand, he's spending 90% of his time trying to optimize his biology. And that's just realistically unfeasible for 99.99999% of the population. And you guys are doing the Brian Johnston for all of us and trying to um, digest that into a form that we can apply to our lives without having to do that ourselves because we have lives and jobs and we do want to be healthy, but we can't just sit around all day and shine UV lights into our buttholes to hope that it adds 3 days to our lives, right? So
yeah,
and it's yeah, sorry, that my comedian coming out there, but yeah, and the health span versus lifespan thing is important too because realistically, okay, the modern medical system is amazing. Like we spend enough time maybe um bashing it here, but realistically our overall lifespans as a population have gone up, right? And however, if we say you live to be 100, the way things are today, usually those last 20, 15, 20 years aren't that great, right? So that's, it's kind of like you get more pizza, but it's crust, right? Why? I don't want more crust. It might as well just, get me out of here at 70 kind of thing.
yep,
That's where my mentality shifted when I started getting into the longevity stuff is now I train. The reason that I want to build muscle is that I know before the age of 25 where I'm at right now, it's you can build muscle so much easier than for the rest of your life. So I'm trying to build a base now that I have until I'm 80, right?
yeah.
Because then, when you are 80, you break your hip, that's tough to recover from, right? Um, so it is the best time is now, I think, for anybody that's whether you're young or old, whatever, just the best time is now. So yeah, that's definitely I'm excited. I'm excited to get my results and to talk to the longevity coach and to be able to because so far from my conversations with you and reading the book, it's been so much even for me to digest. I'm excited to see how your product helps me understand what's important for me. You know what I mean? And dive into that, right? Like if my ApoB and whatever is okay, and if there's another biomarker that I really need to work on, how do I work on that? That's where I have to focus my efforts. Because at this point, I don't know, right? I don't know what I need to focus on,
Yeah.
uh, which is which is really cool. So I guess to like end it off here, are there any upcoming projects or maybe like initiatives that you guys are excited that you're working on and with MyHealthspan coming up or like what are you guys what's in the oven right now?
So the thing that I'm most excited about is so access is always an issue, even with
Hmm.
my health span. There's a price tag there.
Yeah.
Uh, so when we've been meeting at our meetings and when we had our offsite, one of our big things was like, how can we erode at that access? How can we make this way more accessible? And one of the ways that we're going to launch is the ability for people to get their blood work done, or have the blood work they've had done, like yourself, because you advocated for it,
Hmm.
bring it into our system and get all those insights
Okay.
right off the bat. And if you're missing certain things, you know what you're missing. So just really bring down the barriers as much as possible. That's what I'm really excited about.
So I've had my blood work done for like 3 years in a row now, once a year. I'm going to be able to upload all that
Yeah.
to you guys. That's awesome. And then how is that going to differ from, because I know you guys send over what do you call it? A phlebotomist? Is that
Yeah.
the correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
To,
our blood testing is going to be more encompassing
mhm.
because we're touching on a whole bunch more markers, but you're going to exactly see where the holes were before.
Mm,
And the other important thing is you want to be able to follow this with time. And
right.
for some people, maybe what they need isn't, the 58 marker blood panel. Maybe they just need the genetic testing.
Hmm.
Maybe they haven't had an ApoE test. Like if I tell someone right now to go get an ApoE test, which is a genetic test that tells you if you're, ApoE2, ApoE3, ApoE4, and if you're ApoE4, then you're at increased risk of cardiovascular disease and Alzheimer's. Getting that saliva test in our marketplace is very, very hard. But
Yes.
we make it easy.
And
Um,
expensive, from what I understand. I don't know if you want to touch on that at all, but from what I
it, it-
understand,
and
if I,
if you want an ApoE test, I mean, we've worked hard with our lab to bring down the cost immensely. And I think our ApoE test is 1 or 200 bucks.
right.
Um, that's more of a Rex question, but
Hmm.
we've brought it down to as little as possible for something to be mailed to your house with a return mailer that
Hmm.
goes out and that can get like a bona fide genetic test done for a couple of $100. And that's a one-time test.
Yeah.
You really need that. That doesn't change.
Yeah.
That stays with you for the rest of your life.
Yeah,
Um,
because all this stuff, not only is it hard, if I want to get a comprehensive analysis of all these biomarkers that are important towards my longevity right now as it stands through the Canadian healthcare system, or even outside of it, if I have to go outside of it, not only do I have to figure out where I can get all of this done, different places, not all of them test, so certain markers the Canadian system only tests once you've had a heart attack, but I'm gonna have to pay an arm and a leg, like pay a lot of money to
And
get
even
all
within the
that done.
Canadian system, like there are these executive sort of medical clinics that are offering, these full-on assessments, and they're like 10 grand.
Yeah,
Um, and um, and then even our full panel is a fraction of that.
right.
Um, but hey, you know what? We want to be able to work with people because we believe in this mission. Is like, okay, you know what? Bring us your blood work
Hmm.
and let's continue getting you tested. And if you need to add on, like, for example, a VO2 max test,
Right.
um, let's just make that accessible for you. Let's meet people where they are, and just break down the barriers with allowing them to advocate for their health. And not telling them that, oh, you need to be able to go to, an executive health program that's 10 grand, or you need to go to the States and
Right.
join, one of these TIS clinics that can be up to 100 grand a year on a subscription basis.
Yeah.
Um, just not like that's not how we're going to achieve our mission of trying to get people, Canadians to improve their health span
Yeah.
as a whole. We're
Yeah,
not going
hopefully not only Canadians, but I think it's this like it's the same case everywhere. And that's the key term is barriers, because that's all there is. If you want to do this, no matter how uh however informed or motivated you are, there's a lot of barriers that you have to overcome, and you guys are making that a little easier. And that's awesome because yeah, the system is great, keeps us alive much better. I'd rather be alive today than 200 years ago, but that we have so much knowledge now and so much of a better understanding that's exponentially getting better with all the tools. I graduated from my master's program in 2 years ago in 2023. Since then, I'm sure there's been have been so many breakthroughs that I'm not even aware of. And in medicine, I'm sure you have to keep re-educating yourself and keeping up with the data. We know so much more now, and the fact is that our medical system is outdated, but people are making money off of it, so it's hard to change. And I'm happy that there's people like you, Zia, with Rex and MyHealthspan that are trying to make it easier for us. And there's always an option, right? Because I can't rely on the system now. I can go to you guys, and yeah, that's exciting. That's exciting. And that you guys are Canadian is awesome too, because I know there's a lot more of innovation going on in the US. There's some companies that are there, but when I saw you guys and you guys are Canadian, a bell went off right away, and I'm excited to be working with you. And thanks for coming on and talking. Is there anything else you want to plug, or you You happy with that?
Oh, that was a fun conversation, Matt.
Awesome. Thanks for coming, Zia. I guess I'll talk to you shortly with the,
That's
I
right.
don't even know. Yeah, I'm not even sure how it's gonna, I'm excited to find out, but,
Oh yeah, Rex will keep you up to speed.
yeah, for
He's more
sure.
organized
For
than
sure.
anyone else that I know. So
Awesome. All right. Thank you everyone for listening. Thank you, Zia, for coming on and talking, and thank you for trying to keep all of us healthy, man. Thank you for that. All right.
absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity, Matt.
Awesome.